Welcome to Reddit Aliens. What's the strangest and most unexplainable thing you've experienced? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Condensed version. I had a dream about hearing my 6-year-old at the time grandson's voice on the other side of a door. Later that day, I mentioned it to my daughter, who said her son had woken her up in the night because he was dreaming about hearing me talking to him. He said he couldn't see me because I was behind a door. 3 years ago, I had a bizarre dream involving me and my grandpa. In that dream, we're sitting at a park that I don't recognize. The weather was good and the atmosphere was relaxing. We talked about some stuff, which I forgot what about. Then suddenly, the sky darkened. I looked up to see what's going on, and I saw a group of extremely huge bird-like creatures flying toward us. Other people in the park seemed to not notice anything. My grandpa was also looking at the sky, so I asked him what's going on and why only us could see them. What he said still chilled me to this day. He said, "Of course, only the dead can see them." I woke up all of a sudden with my heart pounding so hard, and I was very sweaty despite the cold weather. I was unable to sleep anymore that night. The next day, I received the news that my grandpa passed away that night. I think that it's just a big coincidence, but I can say that it's one of the most mysterious things that happened to me. When I was young, I was bullied at school and crying all days and night. One night, I wanted to make it stop, and then I felt like a warm hug. It was amazing. I was alone in my room, and at this moment, it was like something or someone hugged me. It felt so real. It was the first and last time that happened, but it was special. Several years ago, some friends and I were driving through one of the millions of small towns around the North-South Carolina border in the mountains. It was well after midnight. My friend looks behind us and sees a pair of headlights coming up on us, quickly, like easily 60 to 70 miles per hour when the limit is 25 or so. No signs of stopping, so my friend pulls over to let the car pass. And what passes us is 2 lights, just lights. Far too bright to be a firefly or any luminescent creature, as bright as headlights if not brighter, not attached to anything. No car, nothing. Just 2 lights booking it down the road. I know we say that dogs are man's best friend, but cats can be pretty cool too. I'll add my sweet one, but if there's interest, I have some scary ones too. When I was young, like 9 or 10, my favorite cat got hit and killed. He was black and white, with the sweetest personality, and sadly didn't die right away. My parents wouldn't let me be there with him while he passed. My sister was allowed, so he wasn't alone, but he passed without me. 2 weeks later, I woke up in the middle of the night to him laying on me like he always did. And when I realized, I sat up and watched him jump off the bed, walk into my closet, and round the wall. I got up and went to look in the closet just in time for him to walk into the wall and disappear. I miss that baby still, and I'm so happy he came to say goodbye. My grandma passed away rather young. After her funeral, family members kept telling my mom, "Your mom visited me last night," and it pissed my mom off. She was the favorite, so if anyone would have gotten a visit, it would have been her. She was driving back from her aunt's house and asked out loud, "Mom, if you really are visiting people, can you give me a sign?" At the next red light, the car in front of her had a custom license plate. It read Nedra, my grandmother's name. I have 2. I'm not sure if they'd count as unexplainable or strange, but I think about them quite often. The first didn't happen to me, but to a friend of my parents. My dad passed away last year in January, almost a year to the date, and shortly after that, a friend of his and my mom got badly infected with COVID. He lives in a different city about 6 hours away, so he sadly was not able to see my dad before he passed, nor could he attend the funeral. One evening, he was really struggling to breathe, and everyone was really worried he wasn't going to pull through. The next morning, he woke up and he was doing better. When his wife checked in on him, he cried and said my dad had visited him and told him everything would be fine, that he was going to be okay. The other incident was just before last Christmas. I'm a person who absolutely loves Christmas, and this last one, being the first without my dad, made me not look forward to it at all. One night, when I was feeling particularly sad, I dreamt that my dad came to visit me. He said he only had a day in which to spend with me, and we did all the things we used to do together when I was little. Right before I woke up, I had a really emotional moment with him where I got to say goodbye. When I did wake up, It felt like the biggest weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I know it's all just our subconscious doing its thing, but I can't explain the feeling after those moments. After my brother passed, I inherited his old TV. I had never seen the TV before. I set it up in my bedroom, but it had an anti-thief code on it, so it wouldn't tune to channels without having a 5-digit code. Weeks later, I dreamt of my brother and he told me the code, which worked. I've had too many to recount them all. I'm not psychic or sensitive or anything, I just have seen a lot of weird shit happen. The first one, I was about 9. I was friends with a girl whose mom had moved houses several times because she was being chased by a ghost. They knew who it was. The first house they met it in had a tragic death. They called the ghost that dude's name. It had chased them across state lines. So I knew the story was at her house. She had a new puppy named Saskatoon. We were walking the pup around the block. Mom was out getting groceries or something. When we got back to the house, all the furniture had been moved, like couch blocking the door moved. My friend yelled at the ghost to put it back. We walked down the street and back. No one entered. No one left that house. All the furniture was back in place when we got back.
Sure, guardian angels are cool, but have you ever heard of a guardian alien?
Was driving down Route 94 in Callaway County, Missouri, fairly close to the nuclear plant, and got pulled over for speeding. I mouthed off to the cop because I was a dipshit college kid, and he made me get out of the car and do a field sobriety test in broad daylight, even though I was stone sober. All of a sudden, we heard what I initially thought was the nuclear plant exploding several miles away, but was probably a sonic boom. Looked up and saw what looked like a generic airplane, other than it being black, which seems uncommon, flying in a very unnatural way at what appeared to be regular airliner altitude, but could have been lower or higher depending on the size, I guess. It changed direction so abruptly that it would have been 100 plus Gs at regular airplane speeds. It appeared to be going fast as F. It changed directions like this multiple times, like 45 plus degree changes in heading almost instantaneously. Hard to describe how impossible or otherworldly it looked, zigzagging away. Heard the cop say, "What the F is that?" under his breath several times, and we just stood there and watched it until it got low enough that it was behind some trees. Cop was extremely shaken up and told me to get back in the car and slow down. Ever since then, I firmly believe aliens exist, and even more firmly believe that they 100% got me out of a speeding ticket for 15 miles per hour over. Thanks, aliens. This happened to me about 15 years ago. I live in Taiwan, working as an English teacher. I've lived in the same apartment for many years, and this took place a couple of years after I moved in. For some reason, the air conditioning in my living room and my bedroom started to randomly turn on and off, as did the TV. At first, it was only once a day. Over the course of a couple months, it slowly escalated to happening 3 or 4 times a day for the AC and a dozen times a day for the TV. I slowly got more and more annoyed with this until I finally had had enough. One day, after the TV had turned itself off 6 or 7 times in half an hour, I put down the remote, stood up quietly, and just glared at the room, as though I were addressing a classroom full of rowdy kids. After half a minute, I said, first in Mandarin, then repeated in English, "Look, I don't mind you living here with me, I'm not scared of you, but I won't put up with this. Playing with my TV and air conditioning, if you keep doing it, I'm going to unplug everything and you'll have nothing left to play with." From that day on, the TV and living room aircon never misbehaved again. The bedroom aircon only did it once more several years later. I had moved out to live with a girlfriend, big mistake, for 2 years. After breaking up, I got a lucky break in that the apartment was available again, so I moved back in. My first week in, the bedroom aircon turned itself on once while I was sleeping, and never again after that. I think it was kind of a welcome back. There had been one time the girlfriend insisted on doing some apartment cleaning while I was out. She later told me that after I left, she felt like she was being glared at and a door suddenly slammed where there was no wind to push it. I had lived in a town on the East Coast my whole life. It was a small town, and so everybody knew each other. My school holds around 400 students, so it's pretty small. We didn't regularly get new students, but this day in sophomore year, we got 2. They were both girls, and were both sophomores, same as I at the time. I became friends with one of them. We'll call them Casey. About a year goes by. We're juniors now in our first semester. It was announced that there was a car crash in the neighborhood next to the city I lived in. The other transfer student that I was not friends with was the victim. It was announced later that day that she had died from her injuries. I wasn't very good friends with her, so it didn't affect me too much, at least not more than a low mood and condolences. What surprised me was that no one else was upset. Not a single one of her friends, nor teachers or parents. This is where the unexplainable part comes in. I went to my guidance counselor to talk about what had happened because the fact that seemingly no one had cared bothered me. I asked him how he felt about the incident, and he said that he hadn't heard the news, but was sorry I'd lost a friend. I told him we weren't close, but asked if he could look up her name for me, and he told me the girl I was asking for didn't exist in the school records, but found a student who shared her last name. The student? Casey. But Casey had walked into class the very next day like it was nothing. I still never understood what happened to the other transfer student because there was no record of her wherever I searched. Still the craziest thing to ever happen to me. Wow. My family and I had been hearing things around the house for days. The next day, a wedged packet turned up in a bin. I don't have wedges. That night, I kept hearing voices in a part of the house next to the garden and behind the fragile fence. Checked the next day, no one there. When I was young, 4-ish, I was somewhat sensitive. There was a prophetic dream I had of someone kneeling in the corner of the living room, dining room that was normally covered by a cabinet. At this point of my life, I had never seen that wall without anything in front of it. The man was wearing a red flannel shirt, jeans, and had that abstract dreamlike blur. About 7 months later, my parents had decided to replace the carpet, and scene for scene, my father in the red flannel was explaining what replacing carpet was and why the cabinets were moved. Me and my friend are driving through the mountains of Colorado at 4:30 a.m. to go skiing when we see a bright blue light streaking across the sky east to west. We just chalk it up to a large shooting star that was unusually bright. After a couple of seconds, there's a sudden bright flash that lights up the sky, and light now was traveling in a different trajectory, about 90 degrees off of the original path, and proceeded to fly out of view.
Sometimes, if you ask for a sign, you get a lot more than you bargain for.
I had a dream about 3 years ago, running into a hospital room crying out, "I'm here, I made it, I'm here, don't leave. I just got here, how did she pass so quickly?" I thought this dream was about my mother. She was terminally ill with stage 4 cancer, and I had been living out of state at the time doing an internship. Got a call the next day, and it was my cousin telling me my grandmother had just passed away the day before. Not sure how, but basically she did exactly what I saw in my dream. She was driving from work to the hospital to see my grandmother, and she passed moments before she got into her hospital room and said the same thing I was yelling in my dream. Super weird. Another one for you. When my mother finally passed away, I was miserable. I asked her every day to give me a sign if I needed to go back home or stay in my internship. Well, one day, I was at my breaking point running an errand for the business I worked at, and in my head I was saying, "F this, what am I doing? Mom, please give me a sign." I got hit by a car and knocked down into the median lane. I'm very fortunate no one was making a turn for the other direction of traffic, or they would have ran over my head or leg, I don't know. The car that hit me stopped in the median in front of me, so you couldn't see me lying on the ground. Thankfully, I was okay and went to the ER, but my boss at the time handled the whole thing super poorly. I got fired the same day after I was hit because I walked out and told him to put the effing Christmas tree up himself, and I'm going to the ER to get an MRI to make sure I don't have a concussion. Obviously, he was more worried about decorations than my health. When I talked to an attorney, they said I could sue the business for not making a worker's claim because I was injured, but he's literally not worth the time.